Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Well guys, you join me back on the shore and I'm actually doing a little bit of mackerel fishing today. I'm wanting to catch some mackerel for bait so that I can top up my freezer in preparation for the autumn, winter and spring months for my beach fishing. Predominantly beach fishing, I'm going to use the mackerel and I'm going to freeze that mackerel down and I'm going to salt it just before I start to use it. So like I said, you join me on the shore and I thought I would share this with you. I've not done a mackerel fishing video since last year, and I'm going to show you two ways of which I catch mackerel. The first way is more productive than the other, but the other way is a little bit more fun, it's a little bit more sporting, but like I said, it's not as productive. And I'll go through everything and hopefully share some tips with you so that you can go out there and catch mackerel. If you're new to the channel, or maybe you subscribe to the channel but you haven't hit the notification bell, you may have missed a notification that I have actually started a brand new fishing channel with good friend and fishing buddy Steve that I've fished with before early last year, and we decided to start a new fishing channel together. On the new channel it will be predominantly sea fishing. We've just got ourselves a new fishing boat as well. So we're really excited to get some trips onto that. So guys, because you support me on this channel so well, it would be fantastic if you could go over to the new channel and give us some support. Subscribe, watch the videos that's on there just now. There is half a dozen videos on there and the channel is doing pretty well just now. We've got almost 2,000 subscribers and it's only been going a month. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind giving us your support, that would be greatly appreciated. I will put a link of the new channel at the end of this video and you'll see that link down here somewhere. I'll also put a link in the description if you miss the link at the end of this video. Now the tide is on its way in, we call that the flood tide. It started flooding in probably about an hour ago. I do prefer to fish a flood tide. I do think that fresh fish come in with the fresh tide. Like I said, it's been flooding in for about an hour. It's coming in pretty quick, and the shore that I'm on here, it's quite small, rocky shoreline. It's quite shallow until about maybe 40 feet out, and then it drops away really quickly into about 30 and 50 feet of water, depending which part of the coastline we're on here. So if I moved along maybe 200 yards, I'll be casting into 60 feet of water. I know how deep it's there because I've kayak fished there. So the first way that I'm going to show you, like I said, this is my go-to method when I just want to catch some mackerel really quickly for some bait, or maybe want to catch some mackerel for the table so I can take them home and cook them, or just cook them on the shore here. And what I'm using today is mackerel feathers. This is a trace of 3 mackerel feathers, and I have a 40-gram slow jig. So guys, take the end of your braid and have about 10 inches and just double the line over so that you can form a little loop. Take the end of your loop and put that through your quick swivel or whatever it is you're going to attach your braid to, just through the eye. Tie an overhand knot in your line, in your doubled over line, like so. Really easy. And then take the end of your loop and put whatever it is you're tying on to your braid through that little loop. And then just with your fingers, you just want to take up some of that slack line onto your line so that it forms a knot nice and easy. And then just wet it and gently pull on both lines. So your tag end and your main line, gently pull that down so it cinches down, and then pull on your main line only so that really locks that in place. And the Palomar knot, guys, is the best knot you can use for attaching any terminal tackle directly to braid. It won't slip. There's no need to do double, treble Palomars. Single Palomar knot is all you need. In fact, anytime you add more turns to your Palomar knot, this just adds additional friction to your line and it weakens the knot. And then just cut off your tag end, nice and neat. Nice sharp pair of braid scissors, and then discard that in your tackle bag, take it home with you. And then once you have your quick clip swivel on, or whatever it is you're going to use, you can then attach that to your lures, your mackerel traces, etc, etc. So when it comes to mackerel feathers, there's an abundance out there, guys. You know, you can get really cheap ones. These are like 5 in a trace, and these ones which are 3. Now, for my personal preference, I like to go for traces that's got 3 in it. From the shore, it's much more manageable casting 3 mackerel feathers than it is 5 or 6, because the length of your trace is really long and you've got to try and get that behind you to cast out. So I'll go for ones that's got 3 on it. I just think they're more manageable. So I'll get this out of the packet and then I'll show you what I'll do next. Just unravel your trace from your packet, take off the hooks however they're hooked into your trace holder or cardboard. Again, take your rubbish home with you guys. There's enough rubbish on our beaches, we don't need to add to it. And then just carefully with your trace, and when you take it out of the packet, is you just want to carefully unravel that. Now this trace luckily has a quick clip on the end and a swivel at the top, which is really handy because we don't need to tie any further knots whatsoever. And just carefully unravel your trace. It's generally quite easy because the line is normally quite thick. So on this we'll have a quick clip on the end and a swivel on the top end. Just make sure, try and take some of the kinks out the trace. It'll make it work a lot better. And then onto the swivel on the end, I take my quick clip swivel that I just tied on with the Palomar knot, put that through onto the swivel, and that's us almost ready to fish. All we need is some sort of weight on the end. So on this trace of mackerel feathers, I'm actually going to put a metal lure on, and that will give me an additional way to catch mackerel. And the metal lure can often pick up bigger mackerel. Metal jig, 40 grams this one, and I'm going to attach that. This has actually got 2 assist hooks on it. It's a slow jig and it's 40 grams. And we are ready to fish. Literally 5 minutes, if that. And let's get fishing. Just test my drag. That's on pretty tight. I'm going to slacken it off slightly, but still so it's tight. Now the rod and reel setup that I'm using, I've got a 9 foot 10 to 50 gram rod, and that is coupled up with a 4000 size reel. I generally use between a 2500 size reel and a 4000 size reel. No bigger. I don't like big bulky reels, so no bigger than a 4000 for me. This has got 30 pound 8 strand braid on it, and guys, this braid only cost me about £7 for 300 metres. It's very strong, it's very fine diameter, and it's very smooth. For the price, you're not going to get much better than that. If you'd like more information on the exact setup and the names of the rod, reel, etc. that I'm using, just leave a question in the comments below and I will answer them, guys, and I will get back to you. Oh, I forgot to mention about this rod actually. This rod is 4-piece, so it's fantastic for putting in your backpack. I use it for going up the sort of Highlands of Scotland, put it in my backpack. It folds down very small. So another positive for this little rod is it's a 4-piece rod. So, first method, mackerel feathers, metal lure. Take you through casting with braid and certain things you should do. A lot of people are quite apprehensive about using braid, and really there's nothing to be apprehensive about it. Like I said, the braid that I've got on this reel, a 4000 size reel, is £30 braid. It's 8 strand, and this braid is dirt cheap. And I use this braid from £30 down to £20. I use it for bass fishing, and it's a fantastic braid. Like I said, if you want to know what it is, put a question in the description below and I'll answer your question. So for braid, what you want to do is just make sure that the braid is not overfilled on your spool. And what that means is you want to see the little lip on your spool of your reel, so that if you overfill with braid, it tends to fly off the reel really quickly, especially when it's dry. Another tip that I use just before casting is tend to wet my braid or do some short casts under control just to get that braid a little bit wet. It stops it flying off a little bit too fast. When you put your braid on, if you are a beginner or you're new to the sport of fishing, ask your tackle shop if they can put the braid on for you. They'll put it on in such a way that it's under the correct tension and it's not on really loosely. The last thing you want to do is put on braid onto your spool of your reel with loose coils. You're only asking for trouble, and believe me guys, you will get into tangles. It will frustrate the hell out of you. So when you put braid on yourself, make sure you use obviously the proper knot to put it on. And when you put it on, I normally use something like a baby wipe or a damp cloth, and I'll run that through my fingers like so. I'll have the rod pointed towards the spool that it's coming off. I use just a little sort of spool holder, and I grip the line really tightly with my non-winding hand, my rod hand, and then I wind pretty sort of slowly, but enough that you're not there all day putting line on your reel. And you want to put that line under tension onto the spool of your reel so that you can't push your fingers through it or move the strands of braid with your fingers. If you can move the strands of braid with your fingers, or it feels soft and spongy, you've put it on too loosely. And again, you're only asking for trouble with getting wind knots and probably a bird's nest. It'll come off your reel in a big clump sometimes, especially when it's dry. So a little tip on actually filling your spool. Feet's just getting a little bit wet here. For casting, I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs on casting, but I like to get a firm grip on my rod. I'll at least put either one finger on the stem of my reel and grip my rod that way, depending how big your hands are. And my trigger finger is almost in line with the spool, or the top of the spool of the reel. I move the bail arm just enough so I can grab the line with my trigger finger, and I don't put it in the groove of my finger. I put it on the pad of my finger, this. So right in the middle of my pad of my finger, not on the tip so it slips off, but just on the pad. I've got enough line hanging freely so that I can cast it with minimum effort. So, like just now, there's probably about 6 inches to that little quick clip swivel, and then obviously the length of the trace or the lure or whatever it is you're using, so that you can get a good back cast. Which, if you get a good back cast in terms of, you know, when you put your rod behind you, your lure's not going to hit off the deck, anything like that. So once you've got the line on your trigger finger, just put your bail arm over so it clicks into place, and make sure it clicks into place, otherwise it could spring back in the middle of your cast and you're going to get what's called a crack off, and you're going to have the best cast of your life, and your lure is going to keep going to the horizon, but it's not going to be attached to your rod, it's going to break. So just make sure that when you put your bail arm over, you hear the little click. And like I say, the firm grip of the rod, either 1 or 2 fingers over the stem of your reel, and that is me ready to cast. That has got the pressure of the lure, and that is tight onto the spool. When it comes to casting, your back cast wants to be approximately, if 12 o'clock is straight above me, the rod behind you, it wants to be about 2 o'clock. And then on your forward cast, you want to release when your rod is about 10 o'clock. Now what you can do, and what I normally do, is I like to just swing the lure out so it's away from me. A bit of timing. And with your non-casting hand, or your reel hand, on the bottom of your rod, as you go through, it comes over at 12 o'clock, you want to start bringing, or your reel hand, in towards your body and start punching that through and release at 10 o'clock. I'll try that in slow motion, so just flicked it away from me, release, nice gentle cast. And because it's shallow, guys, if you fluff your cast up, which means it landed really short and you're fishing over weed and you're fishing over rocks, flick that bail arm over and start winding like a madman, because you will get snagged up. So any time that you are not confident that your lure has landed into a safe space in terms of its distance, flick that bail arm over and start winding. And just a point on that, so I'll do that a little bit quicker. So the lure's away from me, forward, release, punch it out. As soon as that hits the water, I put my hand on the reel, I flick the bail arm over, that catches the line, and we're fishing. We're fishing straight away. That lure is sinking through the water, it's under tension with the braid, and I can feel that lure fluttering down. If any fish hit that, I'm going to feel it straight away. It's hit the bottom, start your retrieve. We may as well fish this in, even though I'm talking about casting, because we could catch a fish. So jigging and winding. So again, 2 o'clock behind me, swing it out, forward, release, punch it out. As soon as that hit the water, I put my hand over the reel, and that stops any excess line coming off the spool of your reel. You flick your bail arm over and that catches the line. The lure is sinking under tension. And those basic tips, guys, they will prevent you from getting in a world of trouble with braided line. You know, it will stop you getting bird's nests, it will stop you getting what we call wind knots, which is tiny little knots in your line. So as I was saying, the battery just died here. If there's any slack in your line, you'll get little wind knots. So if you're fishing in windy conditions, what can happen is stop the line, that takes away the slack of the line, the lure's sinking, that takes any sort of belly line out because it's under tension. What can happen if you're fishing in really windy conditions is you'll get a big belly of line because the wind's caught it, and that's slack line. What I do with that situation is I put my bail arm over straight away. With my non-rod hand, I just grip my line like that, and what I do is I wind that line, that loose line, onto my reel under tension through my fingers. Once you get into contact with your reel, with your lure, you can then obviously take your finger away from that and then start winding in as normal. A lot of people just flick the bail arm over and they don't really care about any sort of loose line, or that it's not that they don't care, they don't realise that there's a lot of loose line. Oh no, it's mackerel. These mackerel are right at the bottom of that ledge. One's off. Again, it's just small joys, not big enough to catch or keep. A little flick off. So I hope those little tips for using braid line will help you out. And honestly guys, braid line is superior to mono line in terms of casting, in terms of being sensitive, in terms of its sensitivity and lure fishing especially. I very rarely use mono line. I'll use it occasionally for running ledger rigs, and I use it for float fishing, and that's pretty much the only time I use it for sea fishing. Like I was saying, many people shy away from braid line because they hear horror stories about getting tangled all the time. Trust me guys, it will take your fishing to another level. If you're not confident in using braid, as I said, you know, you can stick to mono if you want. It will affect your casting distance unless you go really light. So for this sort of fishing, you know, mackerel fishing with lures, I would fish at around 12 to 15 pound breaking strain. Any more than that, the line starts to get really thick and you're not really going to be able to hit your targets in terms of casting as far as you possibly can. You'll probably cast 2/3 the distance of what you would with braid. And with the casting, you just want to build your tempo up so that you can punch that lure out, releasing at 10 o'clock, point towards your target, because if you have your rod at the side, or left or right or up higher than your line's going out, that's just going to add resistance, or the line going through your rod guides, and that's going to slow your lure down and prevent you from casting further. The tide is already up to my feet. Now if you're new to a venue and you don't know what the bottom's like, only let it sink for a short period of time. So I'm going to let that sink for about 8 to 10 seconds, and then I'm going to start the retrieve. Just jig and wind. A fairly quick wind because I don't want to get hung up on the bottom. There is a lot of kelp there just as that ledge drops off. And I'm getting chased up already with the tide, racing in. And as I'm bringing that lure in towards me, I'm approaching the shallower water and I start winding a lot faster. Let's just move you back a little bit before my feet get a little bit wet. So first cast, nothing. And what you want to aim to do, guys, is cast as far as you can. If you cast as far as you can, you'll cover way more ground. I'm going to cast out the same area again, but I'm going to let it sink a little bit longer. And what that does is you're feeling through the depths. The mackerel will be at all different depths feeding. Take up the slack. And as that metal jig is sinking, it flutters through the water, so it slows the descent down. If you cast in with just a weight on its own, it will sink a lot quicker than this. So that was maybe about 12 seconds. Start the retrieve, just jigging and winding. A couple of little sea trout jumping in the background. There's 2 or 3 guys fishing up there. I think they've had one mackerel since I arrived here. Approaching that shallower ground where the ledge is coming up, so I'm winding it a bit faster. And that's what I urge you to do, guys. If you're on a new venue and you don't know what the ground's like, don't let it sink to the bottom on your first cast. Otherwise you could end up losing your whole rig, and it's going to be a bit of a costly fishing session. even though everything I'm using, including the rod's under £30, believe it or not. And this rod I use for most of my medium to heavy lure fishing. It's a fantastic rod, and it can handle pollock, double figure pollock. So if it handles that, it's going to handle pretty much anything. Now, like I said, I've got £30 braid on. Of course you can use mono if you want to use mono, but in order to cast far, you're going to have to go really light on the mono, and that's going to obviously reduce the strength of your line. And if you get any little hang-ups, guys, with light mono, you're going to get broke off. So with braid, because it's fine diameter and it's really strong for its fine diameter, I can fish a lot heavier line. But because of the braid is really fine diameter and it's really light, you will cast a lot further than mono. So this next cast, if I don't get anything as I bring this in, I'm going to cast out and I'm going to let it hit the bottom. I know that the bottom's clean out there, it's just muddy. So I'm not going to get snagged at my furthest cast, but obviously if I let it sink close in, I'm going to get snagged on that ledge. So again, I'm going to cast the same place, but I'm going to let this hit the bottom. Take up that slack and keep tension on the line as that metal lure is sinking. And that's the beauty about braid, is it's really sensitive, and as that lure's sinking through the depths, if you get any hits with mackerel, and that's already hit the bottom, so it's not as deep as I thought it was, but I know it's deeper just further along the coast there. And there's guys pulling in mackerel along there, so if they're there, they're bound to be here. Now generally, I don't go fishing for mackerel for fun. If I go fishing for mackerel, it's usually just for bait or for something to eat. Not that I don't enjoy it, I enjoy any fishing, but I'd rather target species that are a little bit more challenging to catch, and mackerel are probably the easiest fish to catch in the ocean, especially around the UK. You know, coming to the end of summer, approaching autumn, and at this time of year, the mackerel should be pretty prolific around the UK coastline. So it really doesn't matter where you go at this time of year, you will probably come into some mackerel. Obviously they need to be there in order to catch them. You know, mackerel are prolific feeders and they will follow the bait fish, and if there's no bait fish here, the mackerel probably won't be here. So they could be here today but gone tomorrow. It's just where the food is, and where the food will be, the mackerel will usually be not far behind. So because it's not deep here, I'm just going to let it sink to the bottom. It's only taken maybe 15 seconds to hit the bottom. So I would say it's probably about 25 feet. Yep, hit the bottom there. I'm always keeping my eyes open just in case there's mackerel busting the surface, chasing bait fish. And if I don't get any here after, 20 casts or so, I'll move along the coastline a little bit and try and hunt out the fish. Otherwise you could stand in one spot all day, guys, and not catch anything. Let's try a little cast over to our left. Not by much, maybe just 20 yards of a difference in terms of direction. Again, I'm going to let that sink to the bottom. Those lures are sinking through pretty slowly because of that slow jig. It's fluttering. It's a little bit shallow there actually. And there we're in, guys. So a little change of direction, found the fish. And that was probably just as I was coming up that ledge there. Now I'm winding quite fast because these mackerel will take me into the shallow. These mackerel will probably take me into the ledge. So 3 little ones, and they are tiny mackerel. These are just like little joeys. If you're going to return mackerel, guys, I tend not to hold on to them, to grab them. I just grab onto the hook and flick them on. One is on the actual jig itself, and that's away. This one's flapping in the shallows. Give it a little flick and there it's away. So at least they're there. Hopefully there's some big ones in amongst those. They're just a little small. Yes, I can use them for bait, but the legal size limit for recreational fishing in the UK is 30 centimetres. So I'm going to cast in the same area that I had those. Maybe the shoal's lurking about, and if those fish dry up, then I'll try different directions. And when I'm looking for a venue for mackerel, that is what I look for. I look for good depths of water. You tend not to get mackerel in really shallow water unless they're obviously chasing bait fish in. You know, you can catch them from beaches. They will chase the bait fish into really shallow water, but you tend to get them more in deeper water when you can't see the bottom. If you can see the bottom, then predators like gannets, etc., from above are going to be able to see these mackerel, and they tend to stay in deeper water where they're not as easily seen from predators. These lures are really cheap, and there's no need to go really expensive for the mackerel feathers, guys. The metal lures are also cheap, bought online. Get half a dozen or so for about £10. As long as the metal lures have a bit of metallic in them. I like pink and silver, blue and silver, or just silver on their own for mackerel. But they will take anything with a bit of flash, really. If the mackerel are feeding, you know, they are prolific feeders. So as you've seen, obviously, I had 3 mackerel at once, and I cast in the same place, and they weren't there on the next cast. That is how quick the mackerel shoals move, and that's why it's worth just moving every so often just to try and locate those shoals of mackerel again. I'm going to go back out to the left. So this rod, like I said, it is 10 to 50 gram rod, but you could get away with casting probably up to 90 grams with this rod because it is quite stiff. So it's an ideal all-rounder rod if you want to do some light ledgering, you know, from the jetty, breakwater, harbour walls, or even deep rock marks. It is a fantastic rod, really, for most things in fishing. Obviously not all that good fishing from a beach if you want to, you know, put a lead weight out a million miles. But for general coastal fishing, a fantastic rod, and like I said, it's under £30, it won't break the bank. So the mackerel shoals are probably just moving about. It is, like I said, a beautiful evening tonight. Hardly a breath of wind, and I'm just going to keep fan casting, searching out the areas, and I'll give that maybe half an hour, and if there's nothing, I'll move along the shoreline, maybe 50 yards, and see if we can maybe come into contact with them there. So the mackerel are not here in numbers tonight, guys, but I'll show you the other way I fish, and it's really simple. It's the same rod setup, and all I do is unclip the top of the mackerel feathers, take that quick clip off, chuck the trace to one side, and put that quick clip that's onto the braid, direct to the braid, onto the lure. And that's it. I only fish two methods, and that's lure fishing on its own. I like to fish really light for mackerel if I'm doing it for fun, which I said I don't do very often. But if I do it for fun, I tend to fish with a really light rod, and I'll fish with a rod maximum up to about 30 grams, which this lure is, and I'll probably go with a lighter reel as well, just so it's even more fun. Slight differences, casting is just the same, you know, 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you'll get a little bit further distance because there's no resistance with the mackerel feathers. And again, when you get to a new venue, don't let it sink to the bottom, maybe let it sink 5 seconds and start widening. Now you can do little jigs with the lure, which is fine, it can add attraction, especially as you jig it and it starts sinking, it flashes, or you can just do straight retrieves. Just keeping your rod pretty low to the water and a sort of medium retrieve on the reel. And like I said, when you get to a new venue, you don't want to let your lure sink to the bottom, just in case it is rough ground, because you don't know if you've never been before. As it comes in, I lift my rod up just to get over any rocks or weed that's there. Flick that little bit of weed off. And from a sort of casting distance between the tip of my rod and the lure, that's probably about 2.5 feet. And this method, just lure fishing on its own with lures, metal lures, and metal lures is all you need for mackerel. And like I said, you don't need to go really expensive for them. Anything with a bit of shine, a bit of flash, get them as cheap as you can. And if you want to take the trebles off, then take the trebles off like I do, put on inline hooks. If you don't, you don't. I just think it is better for the fish. So fishing with the mackerel feathers is more productive than fishing just with a lure. It is my go-to method, fishing with mackerel feathers and a lure, or mackerel feathers and a weight, if I want to catch mackerel quickly for some bait or for the table. If I'm wanting a bit of fun, or you guys want a bit of fun, just put a lure on its own, and you'll have way more fun, and you'll be able to do this all day because you're not jigging and winding. It takes a little bit less effort, and if you want to go really light to catch the mackerel, it can be a lot of fun, and it is a superb way for beginners to get into sea fishing. Most sea fishermen start their sea fishing journey catching mackerel. So guys, there's just not many mackerel about tonight. I could come here tomorrow and get fish a cast. That's just the way it goes with mackerel fishing. Even though they're here in terms of, you know, swimming about in numbers, they just might not be at this little spot. Have had a few, they've just been really small. Too small to keep, and I'll come back in a few days to get that bait that I'm looking for, that will see me through the autumn, winter and spring months for the beach fishing. And I just think that catching your own mackerel for bait is far better than, you know, adding to the commercial pressure that the wild fish is under. For me, it's just better to catch it yourself, plus it's more exciting. So hopefully the little tips that I've given you has helped you out, especially with using braid. And like I said, if you want to know anything about the equipment I'm using, just leave your question in the comments below and I will get back to you. If you want to check out the new channel, guys, I'll leave it in the link here, and there is a mackerel fishing video on that channel where we were fishing from the rocks on a deep rock mark and catching some monster mackerel. If you like what you see, please subscribe and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thanks very much for watching, tight lines, and I'll see you next time on Piscator UK.